Hello, hello. And welcome to this amazing breakdown stream of my Rampage Rally render. And also hello to everyone in the YouTube VOD, which I'm gonna upload soon after the stream, I hope. Yeah, fun stuff is happening. Let me open up stuff. So, for the good spirit, we are listening to the Infinite Journeys render challenge theme now. It's still my favorite soundtrack of any render challenge. And yeah, I think the first thing we are gonna do is look at the beautiful final render that I submitted, which looks like this. Isn't it beautiful? And it's also behind me, so I put it in front of me and look at it from here. Wow. I'm quite satisfied with it. Maybe actually, since we're probably not gonna stay here for long, because it's currently midnight here where I live, so maybe I don't want to stream for so long. I hope I can get it done in 2 hours, so yeah. Depends how many people will ask questions. I wanted to put that in here. You already see the Blender scene in the background. Just gonna have the render in front of it. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome, I would say. Yeah, I've made some small adjustments since the last compositing stream, where I just went back and forth with the grading and grain and halation effects, and also had to try to cut down the file size to get it below 100 megabytes, which is an annoying file limit if you want to add grain to it, because also I need to submit an H.264 file or H.265. But I can't submit Apple ProRes for some reason. I don't know. Which would be much better for, you know, crane and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I hope there's still. I didn't use that much grain as I would or as I did in the other challenges. Maybe that will work out better. Should be fine, I guess. But yeah, that's the render. And let's go to Blender. Or rather, we could start with this one open. And we just go to the work in progress files and look at the very first draft of this render I have, which looks like this. You can see I had pretty much the scene blocked out with the bridge and all, and the angles, the huge robot and the flight unit. To be on the flight unit is not there yet because I didn't export the animation yet. But yeah, progress is progressing, I guess. So, or actually, let's just stay here for some more progress stuff, because then I can talk a little bit better with the Blender scene I have. So this is the second work in progress version. You can see I added 2B. I added more animation stuff on angles. I added the laser and the 2D explosion. And also some lighting, because I switched to Eevee for a preview render. And yeah, it's still pretty basic and viewporty. Let's switch to this one. This is still Eevee. I adjusted more of the 2B animation. I also added high quality hair, which you can see here, because it's bugging around with the hair dynamics. Yeah, also adjustments for the flight unit animation. And yeah, also some obstacles at the end of the bridge to give another reason for the flight unit to fly up, except for only the laser. Yes, I think then we have this one. This is, I think, the first Cycles version, the first ray traced render, where I added more assets on the bridge and some, like, those small stone patches, stones, I don't know, and some containers and destroyed cars and that kind of stuff. More adjusting of animations and that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, from there on out it was adding more small stuff, like for example adding more atmosphere, and adding, where are we here? I think the big one of this was the laser for one. Or did we already have the laser in the one before? Let me check that. No. Okay. So, and we had the laser as a simulation and also the ocean. And the next one from that, we added more fog cards to have more atmospheric effects on everything. Then we also added some small destruction on the part of the bridge where Angles is falling through it, which you can see here now, where I also bought a compositing add-on for lens flares. Basically, you don't see the bridge destruction at all, but I wanted to be there because then nobody can say, oh, but he's falling through the bridge, why isn't this getting destroyed? And there's clipping. Ooh. And yeah, and also explosion time, because Rampage does really nice explosions, I guess. And this is the last 3D progress, basically, with more adjusted lighting. So let's dive right into the 3D stuff. Music is fitting right now. That's cool. Yeah. Factory time. Oh, fitting actually. Because I had to start with a scene. Like, how did I get this idea even? When the challenge started, I was visiting friends, and they know that I pretty much always participate in those challenges, so we sat down together and gathered some ideas, and some part of it was some ideas of me, like a minecart in an old mine, driving down and then doing the big jump. Let me Actually, let me go to the original template, which is, or rather, which was looking like this, kind of, without all the camera shake. That one I added later. But yeah, I thought about minecart in an old mine doing a big jump. What were other ideas? Since I want to work on a CG Lego animation over the next 12 months, I also thought maybe I should do something with Lego bricks. And another idea from one of my friends was, hey, maybe something with a portal in the middle where you go into another setting then. And basically the first two I didn't do because so many people were already doing that. Like, I've already seen at least 3 different minecarts and also multiple Lego renders. And also multiple portal scene changes. But the portal idea specifically I didn't do because that would have been more work on the world department. Because I would have, I would need to do a whole separate setting. And if I think back to my Kinetic Rush render, I think I didn't get into the top 100 then, because I had 3 different settings in 5 seconds, which was probably a little bit too much. And then one last idea was making a Nier Automata render. And then I looked around a little bit. Where could I get some geometry files and that kind of stuff? Because I would never rip something out of the game, of course. And me, never, no, not me. So let's disable that again. And then I actually luckily found correct assets of the, where is it? Of the factory from Nier Automata. Yes. Interesting. This shouldn't be here, actually. I'm not sure why this is here. Interesting. Yes, the factory from the Automata. So I just imported that. Originally I had a plan to include a city here. And some people who follow me a little bit longer may remember the Garlemald render I did, I think could have been 2 years ago, maybe already. So I also wanted to include that on the right side. Let me load it in. Oh god. It's slow. Yeah. Some mountains in the back and destroyed buildings of the destroyed city and that kind of stuff. Ultimately, I didn't include it because it wasn't even visible. It was too far on the right and Angles was blocking everything. So that pretty much went unused. There it is. But I had some holes to fill basically here, because I didn't want to copy paste all of those buildings all over, and I wanted to have something huge here. So I looked to Final Fantasy XIV. Luckily there are near raids there, and I found online, actually that's true, the map files for the first near raid. I just grabbed the factory part and planted that here. Also some more smaller parts in the front here. And also some more destroyed Engels parts to scatter in the scene and the ocean. To give the impression that either there are more of them waiting to awake to attack our heroes, or that there are that 2B and 9 is already destroyed. This small amount of Engels robots. Yeah, I already mentioned that I had Notion here. So let's focus on that now. Because you can see, wow, that's a plane. That's looking somewhat boring. Why does it look so much better in the rendered view? I may show that right now. I hope the computer is willing to do that, actually. And I hope that the stream doesn't, or that my computer doesn't crash while I'm doing that. But that's not the ocean I was looking for. Ah, wait, it's the world. Why is it not showing? Actually, I'm a little bit confused now why the displacement isn't showing up. Because there should be displacement going on. Yeah. As you can see, displacement is enabled. But yeah, let's just talk about the way how I did the ocean. First I had this plane here with the ocean modifier on it, which where I wanted to crank the resolution way up, which wasn't a good idea because that's performance eating as fuck. And therefore I utilized another trick I saw on YouTube, which basically says, hey, just make one tile of the ocean with a very high resolution, and then you make one version with big waves and one version with small waves, and then you can bake that into EXR sequences to get the displacement onto the final plane you're gonna use. And then with some math stuff you can get the scale of everything right. And you can also bake a foam texture, so there's some foam on everything. I'm still not sure why exactly the displacement isn't showing anything here. Because actually it should do something. And yeah, let me see if I can fix that, otherwise you just have to believe me. Yeah, but eventually this ended up here. Ah, I think I know why this isn't working. Because if I preview this, yes, of course. The EXR file is missing. And there I have to get the textures. Textures, no. Ocean. Big waves. Actually, that's not the big waves, that's the small waves. Nah. Don't know why that isn't in here now, but there you can see the displacement file. I can also do the same for the foam. However, that is not... Yeah. I guess it's some weird file shenanigans because of the render farm stuff. More on that later. Ooh, that's loud. Hope that isn't too loud on the stream, but I don't think so. I also made some stream adjustments, so there are some audio fades between scene changes. Yeah. So, big waves. And now there should be displacement. Look at that ocean material. Yes, but basically I have the displacement material of big waves. I'm combining that with smaller waves to get some more detail. Then I'm adding both of that together. Switching around some color channels because I guess. And I also have the foam channel, which I'm kind of scared of opening because it crashed Blender a lot. And then some shader shenanigans, which are resulting in this. There are multiple tutorials on making an ocean material in Blender, so if you want to have someone who can explain that better, please just Google it on YouTube. And I also added an ocean floor plane just to have something there so there isn't endless stuff going on down here. I also noticed that I have subdivision on that now. That shouldn't be activated. Also important, for that displacement stuff to work, yeah, you can see that there are some faces here. You need to enable the experimental feature set here, which allows you to enable adaptive subdivision here, which subdivides stuff depending how close you are to it, which is a huge help performance-wise. And yeah, that's the ocean. So now we have the factory and the ocean, and then another part of the factory was the bridge. That's originally part of the map in Nier Automata, and I think goes until here or something. Just extended it until here and also duplicated it and rotated it to mirror it back here to have the gap. And then also I wanted to be further away from the factory so you can see everything to the top, because if I would have kept the original length, then you wouldn't see very much. Yeah. Here you can see the proxy material meshes I used to simulate the bridge destruction here. Because the arm of the Engels model was a little bit too complicated for simulation purposes, but more on that later. And I had this RBD lab. Let's just disable that for now. But yeah, then also something I did on the bridge, because like this is, it's looking really empty unless we add more detail. So I added those small stone piles on it with the BuggerPy modifier, which is the free scattering add-on. And yeah, I've scattered some stones on it, pretty much. Also on the other side. And I used the BuggerPy add-on for another thing. Don't know how accurate that is, actually, or realistic, but I don't care, because I wanted to add some plants on the bridge to sell it being post-apocalyptic, not maintained, and nature is kind of getting everything back. That kind of stuff. And yeah, let's just pretend those plants can grow in saltwater regions on concrete. But I mean, there is not only concrete there, they are also growing on the assets I included here, which I'll have to load now. Any second now. There we go. Which is pretty much many of the Ian Hubert Patreon assets I have. Those containers, which I just added because they're huge and add some more elements to the scene. And also the cool thing about that is I can just duplicate them, and then the material is built in a way that a random texture is chosen for every duplicate. And that means if I duplicate anything, it gets another texture, as you will see right now. Yeah, that's really cool. Let's just undo that, because I don't want to mess up the scene. Let me just check something. Okay. Yeah, and I also added those assets down here as an obstacle ramp kind of thing. Some destroyed cars, this huge concrete block on the other side. I added some containers, but actually not on the supposed ramp position. Because I wanted to keep that more free there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. On the other side there are more destroyed cars, more plants and that kind of stuff. And yeah, let's disable that for viewport purposes now. Because I want to go over the... Oh wait, while we are at the scene, I can still go over the volume stuff. Because I haven't talked about the atmosphere yet. So basically I added a huge box, which I subdivided a little bit to give it a better shape. And then I just put a principled volume material in it to give some atmosphere, some fog on the scene. And in addition to that, I also added some fog cards, which is basically just steam elements, but with a freeze frame, so it isn't way too fast for the size it's supposed to be. To give some more details on certain areas, so that like there is some cloudy stuff going on in the background here, and it adds more atmospheric detail, which is great on realism, I think, I would say. It looks better, in my opinion. And then, of course, you see it here as well, the god rays I placed. I could have worked with one huge area light with a noise texture as a gobo texture to set multiple light rays down here. But I didn't want one light controlling everything. I wanted some more control, so I made multiple small lights with a noise texture controlling this ray look, kind of, to give more rays per light, and then you could more easily control where the light is going and where it's hitting the bridge and where it isn't hitting the bridge. And yeah. And then one last thing I did was adding some fog above the water, which basically consists out of a huge box with a noise texture in it and a gradient texture. So let me look at it from the side. So the noise texture here is basically giving a value between 1 and 0 on every point in the 3D in this box. And then we have this gradient ramp, which we multiply with the noise texture, so that everything at the top gets to 0. So there's a smooth gradient to the top, and it doesn't just cut off there. And then in the end, I put that into an emission and a volume scatter node, which I'm adding together, so it's rendering a little bit faster and it's more visible. And yeah, that's the shader. To just add some fog above the water to kind of simulate some spray going on. Since we're moving so fast, you wouldn't see any detail there anyway. And since there is so many explosions going on. More on that coming up soon, because now we're done pretty much with the atmosphere stuff. I'm gonna disable the atmosphere volume and the fog cards and that stuff. And I'm also disabling everything besides the bridge, because that's important for the scene context. And now we can look at the characters. So with that, let's go back to the workbench shader. I'm also gonna disabling the Bagapie stones. And also I'm gonna put in the correct texture there. Yeah, I combined two textures here to get a more wait. Actually, I didn't combine two textures. yeah, I replaced those textures with a more high quality street material or concrete because the in-game one was a little low res and this one had a little bit more resolution and with some displacement it looks better. So character wise we have on the one side Engels, this huge intimidating robot who's shooting a big laser beam here and then getting his head blown away and then tumbling back and destroying the bridge here, which we can look at here. Now you can see it more clearly, I hope. And for the animations, I pretty much just looked at the in-game animations and looked around which were fitting. There was this opening of the head for the laser, and then I hand animated some movement to direct the laser beam in the direction I wanted, and then when the head is getting blown away, I took the animation of Engels tumbling back with some small rotation adjustments, also some adjustments for the arm crashing in here. Could also show you the proxy measures for the arm again. Yes. And yeah, that's that. I can also show the beautiful nonlinear animation space I utilized for the animation stuff. Much fun, I have to say. Not really. I really learned that I don't like working with this. There we go. There we are. You can see that there's the laser charge animation, and we have some falling down animations. There is, I think, this one is a small flinching animation when the explosion happens. And then some adjustments which are additive on top. And I really needed some time to get into this nonlinear animation workflow because for some reason every time I added a new layer here it wasn't put on additive but on replace, and then nothing worked anymore. So weird stuff happening. But yeah, it kind of worked out in the end. Now that I just had it open, I can also talk about the bridge destruction, because we have Engels here. And that actually was a rather simple process, very intuitive, because I was using, where is it, the RBD Lab add-on, which pretty much I select the object I want to destroy, hit fracture here, which allows me to get fracture the object into multiple smaller pieces. Then I go to the physics tab and input the destruction way, so like I can say these parts are not supposed to move, until they are activated by something, and these parts are not allowed to move at all. And then I can input the, like I showed you, the proxy meshes as the activators of the scene. So if they hit the parts that are supposed to activate at some point, those parts are getting pushed away. And then I go to constraints and say, yo, those there are, this is the threshold how pieces are holding on together, and then if the force is strong enough, it's breaking apart. And I can set some chunk sizes here. I could also input metal bending here. Ugh. And stuff, and then I can bake everything and add more particles. Smaller debris particles, and also then generate smoke from that. And bake everything, and that's really easy. That I think this whole thing didn't take more than an hour. So yeah, very cool, very nice. Would do it again. So that is actually the bridge part. Now one angles related thing, or actually two angles related things, are the laser, which consisted of multiple parts. So first I started with this cylinder shape with scrolling noise texture on it, with displacement added. Which I then at some point threw out because, yeah, it wasn't looking really that much realistic. And then I decided that I want to do a volume simulation for that, which you don't actually see here because of file structure shit going on again. Give me a second. Why is that in the temp folder? Yeah, that's actually not supposed to happen. Believe me or not. Imogen. Laser. Volume. Beam. There we go. Let's just copy the path. Ah, wait. Charge. Yes, because I split up the beam portion of the simulation, which is basically just, I also have them here. It's just particles, which are not loaded correctly. Why is that happening? That's so weird. Anyway, so yeah. In Imogen I made a particle emitter, which followed the head and shoots out a beam of particles in the beam direction. And then from the particles, the particles emit a volume as well. So it's basically like a high velocity fire breath. And then I split up the beam and the charging animation, so I could play around with different forces here, because I wanted the charge up animation to basically suck in energy particles towards the center of the head. where I then also added the sphere as an origin point, and then blasts away when the beam starts happening. And I also added the cylinder inside of the volume, just to have a physical thing there. And yeah, everything with emissive materials, emissive volume for the simulation, and the particles and the beam have just an emissive material. The beam with the old school emissive scrolling noise texture. And that's pretty much laser. I can... maybe I can actually open up the Embergen file for that. Let me see. Hope the PC doesn't die. That's Blender. Embergen is starting. It's taking awfully long. But I guess that's alright. As long as it doesn't freeze my PC, which happened 2 times actually. I had to restart my PC 2 times because I wanted to, like, I clicked at something in Blender, which wasn't even that resource intensive, and then just did stuff. Yeah, but we have to open. Stop. It's already calculating stuff. I'm gonna, just for the sake of showing what I did, scale everything down again. I exported it with a higher scale. This is the Embergen setup for the laser. So you see what I meant when I said high velocity fire breath. And basically that's just particles being shot out at high speed, emitting fire laser animation. And I also have the laser charge. Don't save. Oh boy. Stop playing. Why does start playing as the first thing? That's the stupidest, the most stupid decision a program can ever make. Especially a 3D simulation program. Why the hell would I want that? Oh hey, I have the simulation with thousands and thousands of millions of particles right now, which are gonna freeze my PC to death. Let's start the simulation when the program starts. That's a good idea. Like, I have 637 million voxels in here. And why is it running again? Ah. Yeah, I also noticed that I hate Embergen. Even though the results I got from it in this render challenge are very good, but sometimes it just does the weirdest shit. It also once reset my whole progress I made for like 2 or 3 hours. Just progress of 2 hours gone. I don't know how that happened or why that happened. Yeah, it was fun. I wasn't pissed at all. Please just click none. I don't want to simulate this. I have the feeling that that didn't work. Let me try to stop the playback. which shouldn't even have started. And a bad thing now, it's playing and I have a small window, I guess, to click as a pause button. Because I can't use space, I think. So, please just stop. Stop. Thank you. I hope that actually stopped everything now. No, don't you start again. Don't you dare. I swear to God, if it starts again now. For fuck's sake. Everything takes so fucking long. Stop. Okay, I'm not doing anything now until I see the play button again. Okay. So I don't do anything. I haven't clicked on anything. So it shouldn't do anything anymore. Can I please click on anything? I swear to God, if it starts again. This program. Okay, so you click on this ×3 multiplier. You scale it down to none, because we don't want any upscaling here. And yeah, okay. Now I can calm down, I hope. And play this back. And this is basically the same thing, particle-based fire emission. With where's it? The force. Visual. Yeah, everything is pulled towards this point, and then at the point of shooting, the inward forces reversed, so it's basically pushing everything out. And yeah, that's the stuff. Okay. And then that's the laser. And then the second thing that happens depends on the second set of characters we have, which are namely the flight unit with 9S in it. Let me show that. Here they are. Oh, I just noticed that did I enable air dynamics on? Oh no. Oh, interesting. Fun fact, something you won't ever notice in the final render, because even I didn't notice it, that apparently I added a wind modifier for 2B's hair, which wait, did I have no? Huh? And yeah, that destroyed pretty much all of 9S's hair. This is supposed to look like this. Anyway, yeah, 9S is also here. But the most important thing is that we have we have 2B here, also with hair particles, which are actually as well simulated. The wind I added didn't do much here, I guess because like the high velocity of the flight unit is already doing so much here. Then I also struggled a lot with the cloth of her skirt, because I wanted to have that simulated as well. And then I was playing around with multiple things. I tried to simulate cloth in Blender. Then I tried to export that because the Blender version didn't work. Then I tried around with Bone Dynamics, so like Bone Dynamics Pro, where I can have the bones dangle around, which also at first didn't work that well. Then I tried to export the 2B model to Houdini to make the cloth simulation there, which I didn't do in the end because that would have been too much work for me. Like I would have needed to understand the whole cloth simulation pipeline in Houdini to get a good result there. Which, if you just want some cloth dangling in wind without regard of stiffness and that kind of stuff, works fine and fast, but like I would have really need to understand every single parameter. So I switched back to Bone Dynamics again and just selected the bones for the skirt and made some chains with some settings where I played around a lot, and then at some point it worked. Yeah. Yeah, and then I also added the sword to her hand. I actually don't know why there are two now. I think it's because I have a particle system. Yeah. Because I also added a particle system to the sword to have some particles when 2B is flying down towards Engel's head to make the finishing slash. Which in turn then leads to the explosion, which we are going to talk about right after the particles. Because for those I added... that's why the wind modifier is here. I added the wind modifier and the turbulence modifier for the particles, so that they have a more interesting shape here. And yeah, that's the particles of the sword. And if you slash a huge robot in a video game and you pretty much destroy it, there's only one thing that can happen, and that is a huge friggin' explosion. Which isn't loaded yet because for some reason Blender decided to load the temp folder for some reason. I don't know what happened there. Let's explosion, please. And here we go. I mean, I can just put the original or the render at that point up. That explosion is what we're talking about. And you see how nice the fire looks and the smoke and all of that, and all that air movement. And yes, I also did that in Ambergen, so let's switch back here and hope... actually, wait, Can I? Settings, preferences. Play project on load. No. Why is that the standard setting? Okay. Recent projects. Angles Explosion V2. I think that's actually playable. Yeah, I imported the Angles model as FBX and also 2B. And the flight unit to give some more objects to interact with, which didn't work that well because they were too small. But yeah, all in all, I pretty much worked with... no stream bot sniping here. Automod just deleted. Insta deleted the bots again. Always nice. Yeah, I was saying. I worked with some vortex twisting force fields here to get those vortex stuff. You might remember the explosions in The Mandalorian. I think the episode 7 from the first season. There were some TIE fighters flying above explosions, and they had this really nice looking vortex going on in the smoke and stuff. And I kind of wanted that in here as well, even though it doesn't really make that much sense physics-wise and realism-wise. But I thought, yeah, there's such a huge force coming down with the slash of 2B that the air is pushed downwards here. And then the explosion, which wants to rise up because of heat, is pushed to the side and then is creating those wonderful twists here. Which also enables the flight unit to fly right through this vortex right here. Which was a nice happy little accident. And then I had the wonderful task of creating the shader for the explosion. Which is always kind of finicky. Because... oh, wait. Let me just close Imogen again, because that's pretty much all I have to show in here. Don't save. There we go. There we are in Blender with the rendered view. And as you can see, nice fire. With this beautiful shader node tree by Gleb Alexandrov. If you ever want to turn an Ambergen explosion into a really nice looking Blender explosion, look up his tutorial on how to recreate the fire shader of Ambergen in Blender. Because it makes the difference of night and day. Because if I would just take this and say strength, turn that orange, and let's put that into put that into the volume. That would be the standard volumetric shader for that, which doesn't work at all, as you might see. Hello, Macho. I guess you wanted to ask about the fire shader then. Yeah, it just said Gleb Alexandrov. He made a tutorial on that shader, and it's working out amazing. That's really thankful that that guy made this tutorial. And like, I think the main part of it is adding together the smoke and the flame shader separately. And then the flame shader is basically this part here, which is just overall glowing part, I guess, which is supposed to light up the smoke, I guess. And that's that shouldn't be visible from the camera view at all. But it should be there to light up the smoke. And then we have the actual fire part, which consists of those two color ramps, which together somehow make this fire look amazing. Like, we can compare it again. This is the standard flames, how we import them. Now we made the first adjustment to clip it to this more natural fire shape, I guess. And then we also cut off the most bright parts. And then we have this wonderful, wonderful fire thing. And then all together with the smoke, it looks like this. All in all, very, very cool. That's the explosion stuff. Then it also concludes most of the angle stuff. One small thing I want to talk about still is the eyes of angles. They weren't glowing in the game model, so I just took the eye geometry, selected it, made a new material, made it a little bit smaller, so it's a small glowing light bulb, basically. There was originally also a glass material in front of it, but you wouldn't see it anyway from the distance, so I just threw that out to save some rendering power. And yeah, glowing eyes, always cool, always menacing, kind of. Yeah, and that's basically Engels, so I'm gonna deactivate him for now, because it's taking up way too much render power now. I'm so gonna disable 2B and 9S and the sword to get to the last part of the flight unit, which is the wonderful jet engine stuff. For that I also just looked up some tutorials on how to do that. Don't know the exact tutorial, but it's basically just, again, making a cylinder with a scrolling noise texture and then duplicating the cylinder with another noise texture which is a slightly different color. And then with gradient texture you can get this nice fall off, and then some color adjustments into the noise texture and emission and transparent and that kind of stuff. And then you also add a bevel, which smoothens everything out, I guess. And also displacement. But I think actually you do it here with the displacement modifier and not with the displacement in here, because then it looks different. I don't know. It kind of works. And from that I also emitted particles, which were then rendered as this one engine trail smoke object. You can see it multiplied in here, which is basically just one random displaced icosphere globe, I believe. My German slipped up there. And it has, again, the volume material, the huge volume material, actually. Jesus. Wait. doesn't... Ah, never mind. That's a volume material. It's not even a volume, it's just a mission. Because I wanted to save render time, I guess. And yeah, that's the flight unit smoke trail. And I also added some ground dust here, which isn't visible, of course, because somehow every folder isn't connected anymore. But to have some dust thrown up from the flight unit on the ground, I'm gonna enable the bridge really quick again. So like the flight unit is flying over the bridge, and then through air movement it's throwing up dust down here. And for that I basically animated an emitter plane below the flight unit, which emits some particles, which in turn emit smoke. And that actually didn't need to be so detailed, because it's moving so fast that it's basically gone. If, like, the smoke you are seeing here is gone from the frame in the next frame, because we're moving so fast. Yeah. Yes, and then rendering everything out was kind of tricky, because I had to think about how I'm gonna split up everything so I can render faster and more efficient. And also have some more freedom to composite stuff later. And I pretty much split up everything in a geometry view layer, which only had like the characters in the scene without any volume stuff. Then I had the atmosphere and the water fog stuff in its own view layer, so like the atmospheric fog and the water fog dust stuff. And the explosion was on its own view layer, the laser was on its own view layer. The flight unit dust stuff with the smoke trails was on its own view layer, and the sword particles also on its own view layer. And then I played around a little bit with the sample count on each view layer, because if I render out the volume stuff on their own layer, I don't need that many samples there as I would need for the geometry, because they on its own render much quicker and nicer and are much easier to denoise. So I could cut the sample count in half, or maybe also just use the quarter of the original sample count, which sped up rendering kind of, I think. I mean, it made compositing much easier, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, if I would have needed to re-render the explosion, for example, then it made stuff easier. But actually, I had to re-render the explosion, so lucky me that I actually rendered out the explosion on its own view layer. Yeah. And then I had to actually gather everything together in one folder. Like all the textures and the volume caches and all that stuff, to upload it to the Fox render farm. Because it needs the same folder structure, and that was really painful to gather together. And yeah, I always forget how tedious the work for render farm stuff is. But yeah, that's the render part. That's 3D stuff. If there are more questions on that. I guess they would have been asked already. Just gonna wait anyway. But I guess no one is here. So maybe I'll just skip straight ahead to compositing. Because that's also something which is fun to talk about. And probably shouldn't take as long as the free stuff, because I actually didn't do as much as last time. So let's get right to it. Gonna keep the Blender file open just in case someone shows up and has some questions. But yeah, let's go to Nuke, the industry standard for compositing, which actually is starting to really grow on me. I would say last year I was still more of an After Effects guy, but now I guess I have to say that, yeah, there's a reason Nuke is better. And like I didn't think about anything that where I said, I could have done that easier or better in After Effects this time. Yeah. So let's switch to Nuke. This is the final node tree. Nuke is a node-based compositing software, for everyone who doesn't know it. Nodes are those small boxes here which are connected by those arrows, which basically are the flow diagram. Like, it starts here and then the image is combined with multiple more stuff and then merged together with effects and all that stuff. Not gonna bore you with details here. First thing first, I had the original render, how it came out of the render farm. The problem here is if I layer contact sheet, I think it is. Problem you might see here is that it has a huge amount of view layers, and therefore, yeah. But I wanted to have so many in here because I needed all the cryptomat stuff to mask out things. I wanted... There's every single view layer, which are, I think, 5 or 6 in total. I wanted all the different color passes for diffuse color, glossy color, or not color, but diffuse, glossy transmission passes, so I could denoise them on their own. And then I exported them to their own image sequence, which were much more lightweight. So if I add a layer contact sheet in here to preview the render passes, it's only 9 here. Or for the explosion, for example, it's only 4. Like the emission pass, the volume pass combined, and also alpha. Yes. And then I set up everything cleanly here. With anchor stamps, I used them extensively here to oh, interesting. To have a clean structure, so so there aren't as many arrows going down from everywhere, and like those basically work like portals. So this is the input portal and the output portal, and I can duplicate that, and then this is also connected, and then you could start another geo node tree from here on, which is really nice and structured. And I think this node tree is much more structured than the previous one I did for a connected crush. But yeah, let's go through it. First things first, we have once again here my favorite part of compositing with Nuke, the point cloud generator stuff, where I can input some passes with the render, and then I have a 3D representation of the scene in Nuke, so I can place 3D items or 2D cards in 3D to get, for example, some smoke elements, some additional smoke elements in there, or additional shockwaves or some stuff like that. And then I also imported the camera, which was an act on its own, because somehow it didn't work for, I think, 2 hours. And I don't know why, actually. But I managed to do it. I did it via an ABC file, Alembic. And yeah, I think the main problem was the nonlinear animation editor stuff. But yeah, funny stuff. Anyway, so we start with the geo. Looking pretty basic, not that much going on. Let me reset the gamma. And I have this shuffle node here, which is basically a node to shuffle around some color channels, or basically image channels which aren't necessarily color related, because I also input the depth channel of the original render pass, which is gonna be important later on, because as you might see, there's no depth of field here. Curious. That shouldn't be the case, right? Anyway. I then added... Ah, no. Actually, I didn't add anything. I was... what did I do here? Ah, yes. Right. This node setup is one way to utilize the transmission and diffuse and glossy channels, because I'm basically taking, we have this, and this is the diffuse color channel, and then I'm basically subtracting that from the render. Oh wait, no, it's not the diffuse color channel, it's basically all the diffuse information of the shader, all the diffuse light stuff, and I'm subtracting that from the render to edit this, and then I'm also dividing that by the color information, by the diffuse color, because I wanted to add some more some color variation on the ground. So I don't know how much you see it, but if I turn that up, I think I have to go back here. Ah, I only did it here in the end. but you can see that there is some color difference going on here. Which I did using the UV map, the UV pass, I mean, from the original render, which I actually had to re-render for that, or recomposite in Blender, because there were some issues going on. And then I put a noise texture on that with some color and pre-comped that with motion blur, so I didn't have to calculate all that for the final comp, which I then multiplied with the color, diffuse color here, then multiplied that back onto the diffuse pass, and then I added that back into the comp. So basically I have some color variation in the shader basically now. And to round that off, I also did that with the glossy pass, where I also put that into the color of the glossy stuff. So yeah, there's some color difference now. That's the first thing. Actually, I did that last. I decided that as the last thing I did before exporting everything. But it's the first step, because it's before I add any different render pass. Then we have this AOV edit node, which is basically this part if you want to do some color adjustments to one singular AOV layer. So I can select, for example, like I did here, the emission AOV, because I wanted to adjust the color here a little bit, because I didn't like how it turned out at the end with all the stuff added on top of that. So I changed that here already. Turned it more greenish and less bluish. And yeah. And like I said, that's pretty much the same thing as if I would subtract the emission pass, made some adjustments with the grade, and then added it back on top. Alright, so next thing. There is a small weird thing happening here. I guess it's because of the animation workflow I did. The motion blur on 2B is way off. So I had to go in there and fix that for the 2 frames where it's off. And I just grabbed some stills from the background and laid them over the background where the motion blur was showing up, even though it shouldn't show up. Then we had this part where I re-rendered the background again as well, because I noticed that the original was flickering a lot, and I rendered out this one with much more samples, so the flickering here isn't as prominent. Kinda worked. Alright. Then the next thing I added was distortion for the flight unit smoke trail. Yeah, that's it pretty much. Because like heat distortion, that kind of stuff. I pretty much did that with the X distort node, which with just a random noise distortion, and that with the mask input of the flight smoke trail. And yeah, heat distortion, yay. Then next thing that's added on top of that is the sword particles, where I actually added some blocky shapes on it. I did that with the with some noise nodes, where I added the blocky node, which is a hidden node inside of Nuke, which I didn't know anything about. And like I made 3 different versions of that, merged them all together, put some alpha on it, then made a mask with some glow on the particles and some blur, and then merged that together. Small U-shift adjustment, and then just throw that onto the render to get some of that pixel look of the sword VFX in the game. It's subtle. I had it more prominent before, didn't look as good. Didn't have it in there at all at first, which also didn't look that good. Sorry about that. I have a new chair, so I can sit much more nicely now, but the armrests are very easy to play around with or adjust, and kind of weird. Yeah, that's the sword part. And next one is changing up everything, because that's the atmosphere part. And it's changing pretty much the whole scene, because then we suddenly have the atmosphere here and back, and all the fog cards, and also something I did, because originally the sky wasn't as clear here, and I made some adjustments where I merged it kind of. It isn't really that visible here, but yeah, kind of worked. And then I also made some adjustments on the color of the atmosphere, so it's a little bit darker. I think that's also helping with the sky detail, and also a little bit more saturated and golden, giving off this nice golden look I have in the final image. Then we're getting to the nice explosion stuff. Messed up the S and sh sounds there. Explosion. For the explosion itself, I made some adjustments on the emission path, make it a little bit darker, or adjusted the gamma a little bit so the dark parts are a little bit darker. Also pushed the reds in the dark areas a little bit. Also added some glow. And then I also added distortion for the fire and the smoke, which overlaid looks like this. So without distortion and with distortion. And like, it's not too... it's subtle, but you notice it's there, and it helps a lot, I would say. Then I basically did the same thing for the laser. And that's the cool thing about Nuke, you can just... you can just copy node setups and adjust them for your needs. But like I could just copy that small node tree from the explosion and duplicate it and use it for the laser as well, with some small adjustments. As well here, using a glow. I didn't like how the laser started rendering wise, because the particles are way too early, and then we have this small beam, and then the third frame actually had some of the fire particles coming through, so I just masked out the first 2 frames. Again, here I added a distortion node for the laser, and I also added a shockwave for the laser shooting. So I added a 2D card in 3D with the scene setup I showed you earlier, and I also had a reversed shockwave in the beginning for the charge up to get some more energy flowing into the mouth of angles. And yeah, that's pretty much the laser stuff. And the further we go on the node tree, the longer it takes to render stuff. Now I don't know what this is. Laser. Ah! Yes, of course. I actually wanted to animate some 2D elements on top of the laser, which I did. So I animated those energy lines going across the laser. You can see it in the final. Ah, wait, that's actually not the final. Haha. Let me just load that up. You can see it when the laser goes off. There are those energy lines, also giving the sense of movement and also adding some stylized feel on that. Yeah. And then next thing I added was the ground dust on the ground, lol. I made it a little bit darker and also decreased the alpha a little bit. So it's not too prominent. And then I also added finally the smoke trail of the jet engines. And then on top of all of that, I added a shockwave of the explosion, which added so much. I was really happy when I first added that and looked at it the first time, and it helps so much, really. And I used that as a mask for the distortion again, for the shockwave distortion, and also as a shockwave element on top of everything. And like I said, it helps so much. I really like it. So, did I forget anything here? No. Okay, then I added a grade node to make everything a little bit darker. And then I also wanted the shadows to be somewhat darker, because in the end they were a little bit too bright. But that was a decision I made in the end. As you can see, this grade node was made a lot earlier than this one, as you can see with the numbering. Yes. And then we have this thing, which is basically again a grade. Actually, this is the grade which turned the atmosphere golden. Because as you can see here, the saturation is getting much more orange, golden, kind of. Yeah. Now we get to the node which we added the depth channel into the mix earlier. The magic defocus node. I wanted to add the depth of field in compositing this time. And I did it with the magic defocus node. Could have used the bokeh or the Z defocus node as well. Those are also pretty standard Nuke defocus nodes. But I wanted some small features the other two don't have, which is namely going to increase the size of the bokeh for that. Because otherwise you don't see it. For one, I wanted cat's eye bokeh. Interesting. Let me just get a filter in there. Because originally I also wanted to use these this bokeh kernel I made for another project. Don't know why this is happening. Anyway, because I actually then turned to using the disk instead of the image I made, because then I could adjust the ring color, so the outer ring of the bokeh is more prominent. Also, I wanted the cat's eye bokeh, which distorts bokeh the further it gets to the edge of the screen. So if I disable that, hopefully it will just display as it should. Yes, I want that distortion here going on. Also some chromatic stuff happening. Yeah. And that's pretty much the only reason I use that instead of the other two. Even though the other two, I think, have better depth estimation. But I mean, in the end, it's a little bit janky and noisy anyway, so I don't know. So let's turn that back down. And yeah, then we have something new to talk about. Last time, you might remember, I made a custom lens flare node group where I could choose a point and then a lens flare would display inside of Nuke. And this time I didn't want to do that because I saw a Blender node group for the Blender compositor, which generates procedural lens flares based on the image brightness you're rendering or which you input. And I used that to generate some procedural lens flares, for example, for the eyes of angles, or for... Why is it so slow all of a sudden? I feel like maybe the cache is full. No. That's weird. We also have the lens flare of the sword. We have one of the most important lens flares, because that's the one that's pretty much visible all the time. The lens flare of the flight unit jet engine. We have the lens flare of the explosion, which actually isn't that prominent. I really don't know why the performance is dying so much right now. And then also the lens flare for the laser. I also made some adjustments on brightness here and there. Get it more or less bright as I needed it to be. because this laser lens flare especially wasn't as bright at the beginning as I wanted it to be, so I had to make some manual adjustments on the brightness there. And then also one big part I added in compositing was adding this. That actually helps, I guess. And what that is pretty simple. It's impact frames. I actually wanted to draw some impact frames for the start of the laser and the explosion. You might see the Guardian of Zelda in Chapter 4 here. Maybe I should cut it out. I mean, yeah, no. And I just overlaid that on top instead of just like I merged it together instead of just showing the impact frame, which especially for the laser is working out really nicely. I really love that look here. And yeah, it's fun experience doing some basically 2D animation. And that additionally with the laser lens flare looks really cool. Yes. And then another thing I did was adding some lens dirt effects. So let's take this frame. So I have this dust texture here. Reformatted that to the correct size. Scaled it up a little bit. Graded it down. Added the defocus so the bokeh kernel is the same. And then used a blurred version of the original image, which I created and added glow on and blurred a lot, and I used that to mask out the bokeh of the lens dirt stuff and added it back on top of the image to add those lens dirt elements which show up around bright parts to add some more glow stuff to emulate the real lens. Something else that emulates the real lens is an ST map for lens distortion. This is the 18mm Open Gate Blutschwall. Oben. It's a distortion map for one specific lens, which I don't know the correct name of. Wait, let me see if I can find it out. No, I can't. But yeah, it's 18mm lens, where the responsible VFX soup took some lens grids with, which in turn were used to create this distortion map, which I can use to drive this distortion in the ST map, which distorts or redistorts this image to how it would look if it was shot with a real lens. Then random grade node without any use. Then something I also added was this lens flare, which I try to emulate the position of the sun with. It's basically a video of a lens flare, of like this light going towards the edge. So it's basically the longest way a lens flare can be in frame and then out of frame. And with some math tricks you could, in theory, make a script where you can choose a point here, and then the position of the lamp in the frame would go to the point. But I'm not smart enough for that, and also the dude who originally made this recording and wanted to do that wasn't smart enough to do that as well, because he didn't finish it. Like, there's an unfinished version somewhere on our university servers somewhere, but so I just grabbed this recording of this lens flare and made it manually. So I just tried to replicate the position of the sun myself and added that on top of everything, which gives this wonderful lens flare here, this rainbow in the end when the camera pans up a little bit. And yeah, then we have a final color grade node to push some blue into the dark parts and some orange into the bright parts. A final reformat node to have the desired aspect ratio, which in turn then I scaled up to 4K because I wanted to do it in 4K. I added then a sharpen node to get some small details at edges back, because like I upscaled it and it wasn't that sharp then. And also because I added a chromatic node then and a halation node, which softens the image substantially. And like if I take out the sharpen, then the image gets very soft, and I didn't want that. So I sharpened it up a little bit so I can easily soft it down again. And then I added some Alexa grain from, I guess, the Alexa LF with native 800 ISO. And yeah, that's it. That's the render. That's the compositing. Pretty much. I hope you understand or understood everything. There's an ad starting now again. But I guess we're pretty much done with everything I wanted to talk about. And yeah, I guess no one's here to ask questions, so... yeah. Let me just snooze this ad really quick, because then I can make my closing remarks on this render challenge and all of that. Yeah, but it was a really fun experience. I really enjoyed doing that. I really enjoyed streaming all of that again. Especially since I finally managed to reach affiliate, even though, yeah, doesn't matter. Yeah, it's cool. I'll get back to doing commissions. Somewhere starting in September, I hope. I reopen them then, I guess. that's it. That's the render. It's over. It's over. Once again, thanks a lot to everyone who tuned in during the last month. Really appreciated that. Especially thank the 3 people who subbed in that period as well. And yeah, we'll see each other again soon on either a different rendering stream, or maybe I'll decide to play some games. Now it's 2 AM and I think I'll go to bed now. So once again, thanks everybody for tuning in. Really satisfied with the render, and I'll keep you updated how it goes regarding the top 100. So have a nice rest of your day, evening, night, whatever, and we will see each other soon. I will also do a short video breakdown again, like I did for the Kinetic Rush challenge last year. So that should come out in just a few days. Bye bye! Woo!